Before you create one more slide deck, worksheet, project, or activity for your next unit, I want you to do something first. Sort. Because when you're planning a unit, there are actually 6 different things you might need to do with a piece of content or a resource. You might reuse it, adapt it, create it, find it, make a decision about it, or realize it can wait. And only one of those 6 options is create. Today, I want to show you what happens when you sort before you build and why it changes what planning actually feels like.
Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Khristen Massic, a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher.
2 episodes ago, we talked about the most important reframe for planning. Planning is deciding, not creating. Last episode, I painted a picture of what planning looks like when it's not following you home every night. Today, we're getting into the how, specifically the sorting framework I use that makes those planning decisions possible. I'm calling it the ready enough sort. And once you hear it, I think you're going to start seeing your planning very differently. If you ever watched the show Clean Sweep on TLC, this is going to feel familiar. The whole premise was take a room that's completely overwhelmed with stuff, pull everything out, and sort it into 3 piles. Keep, sell, toss. And here's the part I always found interesting. The keep pile was almost always enormous at the beginning. People would look at their stuff and think, I need all of this. I use all of this. All of this belongs here. And then the host would come in and help them actually look at each item, and the keep pile would start shrinking. Things that felt essential turned out to be things they hadn't touched in 4 years. Things they were keeping out of guilt. Things that made more sense in a different room or no room at all. And here's the detail that made the whole show work. Whatever they made from selling their stuff was the budget they got to redo the room. So there was a real incentive to move things out of keep. The less they held on to, the more room, literally and figuratively, they had to work with. I think about that show a lot when I'm working with teachers on unit planning, because most teachers that come to a planning session the way those homeowners came to the sort, with the sense that they need to keep, or in this case, create almost everything. And what changes when you actually sort is the same thing that changed for those homeowners. You realize that you already have more than you thought, and you realize some of what you were planning to build you don't actually need. But before you sort, you need to pull everything out. This is the step most teachers skip. Instead of pulling all the materials for one unit into one place, they leave things scattered across Google Drive folders, email threads, old slide decks, downloaded files, and that TPT purchase from 2 years ago they never opened. And when your materials are scattered, you can't always see what you have. You make decisions based on what's in front of you, not what exists. So the first move is simple. Pull everything that might belong in this unit into one place. Not to organize it, not to fix it, just to see it. Because once you can see it, the sort becomes possible. Here are the 6 categories every piece of content, every resource, every activity you're considering for this unit falls into one of them. Reuse. You have it, it works, you're using it again without changing it. And I want to say this clearly, we massively undervalue this category in teaching. If something worked, you are allowed to use it again. You don't earn extra teacher bonus points every time your lesson is brand new. Maybe there's a discussion structure your students already know. Maybe there's a warm-up format that works really well. Maybe you taught this exact activity last year and it did exactly what you needed it to do. Reuse it. That's one less decision, one less thing to build, one more hour you get back. Adapt. You have something, but it needs adjustment. Maybe you used the activity in a different course and the structure works, but the content needs to change. Maybe last year's version was almost there, but one section confused students. Adapting is not starting from scratch. You have something to work from, and that is completely different from staring at a blank document. Create. Yes, there are things you're going to need to build, especially if you're a CTE teacher or elective teacher who has been handed a course without an established curriculum. Sometimes the thing you need genuinely doesn't exist yet. Create is a real and legitimate category. I just don't want it to be the default category, because if everything automatically becomes create, your teacher workload explodes. Sort first, then see what's actually left in this column. Find. Maybe you know a resource like this exists somewhere, but you don't have it yet. Here's the important part. Finding the resource does not have to happen while you're planning. Write it down. Find a video demonstrating this concept. Look for a district resource for the standard. Search for an example for this. Now you have a specific research task and it goes on the list. You don't stop planning, open Google, and emerge 45 minutes later watching a video that's only vaguely related to the unit you were supposed to be working on. You identified the whole, filling it can happen separately. Decide. Maybe you genuinely don't know yet. You have 2 possible activities and you're not sure which fits better. You don't know how much practice students will need. You're waiting on information you don't have yet. That's okay. Label it as a decision that needs to be made. You're not stuck. You're being honest about what requires more information before you can move forward. There's a difference. Wait. And finally, wait. This might be my favorite category because not everything needs to exist before day 1. There are decisions you'll be better equipped to make after you've met your students. Resources you may not need until week 3 of the unit. Things you think you need right now after teaching the unit once, you'll realize you didn't need at all. Let them wait. The clean sweep homeowners who were willing to move things out of keep, they ended up with a room that actually worked. The ones who kept everything ended up with a slightly tidier version of the same problem. Wait is how you keep your planning from becoming that second version. Now, sorting your materials into 6 categories only works if you have somewhere to sort them into, and that's where introduce, practice, produce comes in. I want to make the distinction between these 2 frameworks really clear. Introduce, practice, produce tells you where something belongs in the learning progression. The ready enough sort tells you what you need to do with it as a teacher. 2 different decisions. Introduce is where students first encounter the concept or skill. Practice is where they work with it, trying, getting feedback, adjusting, building understanding. Produce is where they show what they've learned through whatever they're making, demonstrating, or completing. Once you know that flow, you can look at your resources differently. Instead of opening a folder and asking, what can I do with all this stuff? You're asking, does this help me introduce? Does this belong in practice? Does this prepare students for what they'll produce? That's a much more specific question, and specific questions get answered faster than vague ones. A teacher who went through the first round of the unit planning lab described something that shifted for her afterward. She said the planning felt easier because she was matching instructional activities to the stage of learning they were meant to support, rather than thinking of each one as a standalone lesson. And that is exactly right. The activities themselves didn't change. What changed was the intentionality around them. She wasn't asking, is this a good activity? She was asking, does this activity do the job I need it to do at this point in the learning? That is a planning decision. And planning decisions made clearly in order are what make a unit feel finished instead of endless. I don't want to pretend every teacher listening has a Google Drive full of everything they need. Some of you really are starting with very little. Maybe you've just been handed a brand new prep with standards and practically nothing else. Your find and create categories may be bigger than someone who's been teaching the same course for 5 years. But sorting still helps, because instead of, I have to build this entire course, you can identify, here's what this unit needs. Here's what I have. And these 3 things are genuinely missing. Now you know exactly what you're looking for. That's very different from opening Google and typing in the name of your course because you don't know where else to begin. Next episode, we're going to talk about where to actually start inside a unit. And it's probably not where you think. Most teachers begin at the beginning, the first lesson, the introduction. But I found that starting at the end, getting clear on what students are working toward before you plan anything else, changes every other planning decision that comes after it. That one's coming up next. And if you're thinking about your own unit right now and wishing you had someone to help you sort through all of this, that's exactly what we're doing inside the unit planning lab. You're not coming in to plan your entire curriculum. You choose one unit. Then you work through the planning decisions where students are going, how they learn, how the learning flows through introduce, practice, produce, and what you can reuse, adapt, create, find, decide, or wait on. All of the content is available as soon as you join. Link is in the show notes. For now, go back to the unit you've been keeping in mind through this series. Before you make anything new, pull out what you already have for it. Don't reorganize your entire Google Drive. Don't start fixing things. Just sort. What can you reuse? What can you adapt? What genuinely needs to be created? What do you need to find? What decision still needs to be made? And what can wait? Because secondary teacher planning doesn't have to begin with creation. It can begin with sorting. And once you know what you're actually working on, the unit usually becomes a whole lot smaller than it looked from the outside. Finish something that makes tomorrow lighter. I'll see you next time.